Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today I am going to be doing my mid-season madness bracket predictions. The tournament of course kicks off tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, and various other times of course as a result across the world. Friday I put out a video going over kind of a primer talking about all the teams and my thoughts on them, positions on all of them. So I'm going to try to avoid getting too in-depth on all of the teams in this video, so we can get through the bracket without it taking too long. So if you want to hear my more kind of specific thoughts on each of the teams, their strengths, their weaknesses, stuff like that, check out that Midseason Madness primer video that I put out on Friday. I'll link it in the description as well as in the cards. And at the end of this video, you can check it out as well. So that is something to check out. But for this one, we're just going to go through and do the bracket whole thing, one video. Let's go. Let's start with the first match of the tournament, which is the London Spitfire, who are the 8 seed, taking on the Atlanta Reign, who are the 9 seed. This, to me, is an interesting series, an interesting matchup. I definitely think this is the one to watch right now. Probably will be the among the closest games in this first round. Though, for me, I don't necessarily think it is a super close affair. I think that this is an interesting matchup because these are teams that the last time they played, the Spitfire, of course, won that matchup, but I don't necessarily know what the Reign were doing at that point in time when they played back then. Obviously, they mirrored them on the kind of Reinhardt compositions, but we haven't seen Gator play pretty much at all this second half of the season, or the second half of the tournament cycle. It's been pretty much entirely Hawk. I don't think some of that will happen again. I think the Reign were just kind of throwing last time, thinking the Spitfire wouldn't be that good, and then they lost. The Reign, to me, are the better team. I think they should be better. So, technically, if they win, it would be an upset by seeding, but I think they're the better team, and I think that they should be expected to win. So, I'm going to give this one to the Reign in a 3-1 fashion. They've looked better in tournaments than they have in the regular season. They've been, they're a team with some veterans on there. I think they know what they're doing. I think they know what they're up to. So, to me, they should take the series over the Spitfire. Just what I think is most likely to happen. Next, Shanghai Dragons take on the Toronto Defiant. The Shanghai Dragons have never beaten the Toronto Defiant. Fun little Shanghai Dragons fact. They've only ever played one time in their history, and the Defiant were victorious. So, Dragons looking to break that and move up to the point where they have one team left they've never beaten, which would be the Paris Eternal. So, this is an interesting series to look at. Definitely an interesting one. I don't think this one will be particularly close. I think the Dragons are a top 4 team in this tournament right now. I think they look really, really good. And I think they will be victorious over the Defiant in a very dominant 3-0 fashion. I just think it is a way too good of a team in Shanghai. And I think that the Defiant just will be suffering at the hands of a very strong Dragons roster. All right, next we have the Hangzhou Spark and the Philadelphia Fusion. This is probably the best game in this first round. These are two teams who have been very, very competitive so far this season. Last time they met was a 3-0 win for the Hangzhou Spark. The time before that was a 3-0 win for the Philadelphia Fusion in the kickoff clash. So these are two teams that have been back and forth and back and forth. And I think this will be an interesting series, and I think it'll be a good one to watch. But I am a little bit sad and disappointed because I think there are some factors we have to consider with this series that may swing the series in favor of the Hangzhou Spark. Obviously, they get first map pick because they're the higher seed. That didn't really matter in the kickoff clash, though. They picked every map and still lost, so we'll see what happens. But the big thing for me is that the Philadelphia Fusion right now are dealing with some issues with COVID, and so all of the players are going to be playing separately from each other. They're not going to be playing together. That could cause some issues with communication. That could hinder that communication a little bit. Who knows exactly what's going to happen there? Who knows if that's exactly for sure what's going to happen, but I think that is definitely something to consider. The Fusion that we saw last weekend when they beat the Seoul Dynasty was really, really good, and they looked incredible. If MN3 can play at that level, I think we can expect it to do very, very good. But with some of these issues going on, I don't know if I can safely say the Fusion will take this one. So I'm going to say a 3-2. I think it'll be close, and these are two very good teams. But I think right now, Spark take that series over the Fusion. If there wasn't a COVID outbreak, I may have taken, or not a COVID outbreak, a COVID issue with the team, I maybe would have gone the way of the Fusion, but I right now kind of think that maybe just that ever so slight push that gives it in favor of the Spark. Could definitely go either way, but that's where I am seeing things going. Final match is the Houston Outlaws versus Florida Mayhem. This one could be pretty close. It could be interesting. Mayhem have looked up and down. The Outlaws have looked pretty good. Obviously, the Outlaws finally getting that Hawaii trip that they failed to get all of last season. But finally, they have managed to make it to Hawaii. Here they are in Hawaii. Good times for them. Definitely going to be interesting to see what happens when these teams match up. Wait, what? This is really confusing to me. Shouldn't this be... These games are on Thursday. Oh, they're on Tuesday. I can't read. Anyway, I'm getting distracted. I'm jumping ahead of the gun. So Houston Outlaws take on the Florida Mayhem. I think the Houston Outlaws right now look to be the better team. Mayhem have been pretty good at times this season, but I think right now the Outlaws look to be the better, more solid, more consistent team. So I'll say a 3-1 in favor of the Outlaws. I think it'll be pretty close at times, but I think the Outlaws right now look better. They look to be the better of these two teams. And so for me, going for the Outlaws to take this one. So now the teams will get to pick their opponents. The San Francisco Shock is the 1 seed. We get the first selection of opponents, and I think that they most likely, between the Atlanta Reign, Shanghai Dragons, Hangzhou Spark, and Houston Outlaws, part of me feels like this is a team that they're going to pick, in my opinion, between Atlanta and Houston. Those are the two most likely options I think that they would want to pick from, because those are the two teams that I think realistically have looked to be the weakest of these four. And I don't think you go for Shanghai or Hangzhou when you consider the fact that those two teams have looked very, very good and you aren't really used to playing them. Now, I would not be surprised if the Shock go and pick the Dragons, because the Dragons picked the Shock last year in the playoffs as like we want to play the team that beat us last year. I could definitely see the Shock doing that. However, if I'm the Shock, I would rather focus on getting revenge on the team that beat us in the kickoff clash, which was the Atlanta Reign, than I would the Dragons. That's just me, though. I think the Dragons are good, but the team is so different at this point in time that I don't really think I'd want to pick them, because the only player left from that Shock roster is Violet. So between Atlanta and Houston, I think the Shock will probably pick the Reign. Not that I necessarily think the Reign are the weaker opponent between those two teams, but I think that's what the Shock would do, because that's the way the Shock like to do things. The next pick would go to the LA Gladiators, and with the options that are left, I absolutely think they would pick the Houston Outlaws. Give me Houston Outlaws every day of the week. If I am the Gladiators, I think they're probably the weakest of those four teams, and definitely the team I would rather play against. If I'm the Seoul Dynasty, I don't have great options between the Spark and the Dragons, but definitely do not want to pick the Dragons with the way they've been playing recently. So that leaves the Dallas Fuel with the Shanghai Dragons. So Shock versus Reign. Interesting series potentially here. Like I said, the Reign beat the Shock in the kickoff clash, though they also lost to, the Shock at least, lost to the Dallas Fuel. So that wasn't the only loss they had. But I think this is an interesting one here. I think you have to favor the Shock this tournament cycle. I mean, they destroyed the Reign last time they played. It wasn't even a close series. I think the Shock look very good right now. I think the Shock have been a pretty consistently strong team this tournament cycle. I think the meta favors what they want to do. I think they look better than the Reign do right now. I think it'll probably be a 3-1 win for the Shock. They like that first round bye quite a bit, so that's where I'm going for that one. Dallas Fuel versus Shanghai Dragons could be a very good series. Obviously, this was kind of the rivalry last season for the first half of the season, and then it kind of faded as the second half went on, as the Dragons kept climbing and the Fuel kind of started to fall off. This would be the 4-5 matchup. I really would honestly be surprised if the Shock picked the Dragons. Maybe they think that if they pick the Dragons here, they can knock them down to the lower bracket earlier and then kick them down to make them somebody else's problem in the lower bracket, potentially, if they have that confidence. Like I said, I could definitely see the Shock picking them. I don't think they will. I think if you're the Shock, you shouldn't pick them. But moving on from that, Fuel versus Dragons. I think right now you have to favor the Dragons. I don't think the Fuel have played particularly great Overwatch recently. I'll give them a map. But I don't think they looked great. They looked pretty poor against the New York Excelsior, which to me was pretty bad and pretty embarrassing to see. I think that you have to be better than that against a New York team that has not looked very good. I think Shanghai is way too good for that. I think Shanghai is a very solid team right now. They look to be an elite level team coming out of that APAC region. So to me, this is a no-brainer Shanghai pick over the Dallas Fuel. Moving on, LA Gladiators versus Houston Outlaws. This was kind of a close series the last time they played. Quite a few C9s on the side of the Outlaws. Maybe this will be another good series. I don't know for sure, but I definitely feel the Gladiators taking this one. I'll say a 3-1. I think it was a 3-1 or a 3-0 last time. I think the Outlaws are decent. I think they should be able to do something in this matchup, but I'm definitely in favor of the Gladiators over the Outlaws there. Dynasty versus the Spark. I think this will be a banger of a series. I think it was a pretty close series when they played the last time. It may have been a reverse sweep, actually. No, that was Spark against the Fusion. It was a pretty good series last time they played. I don't remember exactly how it ended, but I think the Dynasty, despite the loss of the Fusion, still look very good and should still be favorited. And I think also if they have the extra day of rest and getting to watch what the Spark want to do, I think the Dynasty should be fine here. So give the Dynasty, I'm going to say 3-2. I think it should be a close series, but But I think the Dynasty take this one over the Spark. Moving down to the elimination bracket, London Spitfire versus Hangzhou Spark. This one, to me, is a win for the Hangzhou Spark. I think they look better right now than the Spitfire do. It'll be interesting to see what happens here when I think you have two teams that are very interesting in the way that they play. Obviously, the Spitfire love to play Hottie, love to play a lot of Reinhardt whenever they can, but the meta has kind of moved away from that, so they've been running some other kinds of things as well. They've put Poco in every so often, but the Spark, I think, can play pretty much anything that the Spitfire want to play. Spark definitely give me some concern because I don't think they're a great tournament team. They've never performed particularly well. But I think they still consistently look better than the Spitfire. And so for me, I feel pretty confident putting the Spark in over the Spitfire for this one. Outlaws against the Defiant is another interesting one. The Defiant looked pretty mid this most recent tournament cycle. What's interesting, of course, is that these two teams played in a kickoff clash, and we had a really dominant performance from Pelican, kind of helping the Outlaws win. I thought the Defiant looked better in the kickoff clash than they did in the Midseason Madness. So for me, the Outlaws, who I think the meta does favor the Outlaws a little bit more than it does the Defiant, should take this one. It was a 3-1 when they played in the kickoff clash. I'll predict the same thing for this one. Just seems more likely to me that that's the type of result we get here in that one. Dallas Fuel versus the Philadelphia Fusion. I think this one could be a great series. The Fusion look to be able to kind of compete with some of those best teams in the league right now, and the Fuel have been up and down. They have struggled against some of these other good teams in the league and in the region. With a day of rest for the Fusion, they get to watch the Fuel play, kind of see what they have on their plate. This could be a very interesting matchup. And these are two teams that I think are both in very interesting positions in terms of what they like to do. My biggest concern for the Dallas Fuel as a team is I don't know if I trust Guerrillo or Edison to be able to stop MN3. MN3 has been playing really, really well this season. And if MN3 is given the ability to pop off, he will take it. I think one of the things with the APAC region is there are players who can stand up to MN3 on a lot of the teams, right? Players like Lip, like Fitz, like Shy, even like Dia. These are players who are very strong. Leave, like strong hit scan players, right? On a number of teams who definitely can challenge MN3 and slow him down. I don't think the Fuel really have that. I don't really feel that confident in the Fuel's hit scan capabilities. I think their hit scan is pretty weak compared to that of the a lot of the other teams. So I think this one could be interesting. I think it's interesting also because I don't think there's a ton of, I think support line wise, like they're pretty similar. I think that you have a rookie main support and a veteran flex support. Tanks, I think Fearless generally speaking, more kind of is better than Bellisria, but I'm a big Fury fan. You know, I'm a big Fury fan. Hanben's very, very good. So these are two teams at very, very close levels. So to me, the big difference maker is MN3. I think there isn't really an answer for MN3. I think Zest and Sparkle are pretty close together. I don't think there's an answer to MN3 on the side of the Fuel. So I'm going to say a close 3-2 series, but I think the Fusion have been playing very well right now. I think they take this one over the Fuel. If this matchup happens, of course, there's a chance it doesn't happen, but I think it does, and I think the Fusion with MN3 kind of leading the charge take the win over the Fuel. Bit of a surprise on one there. I actually, I don't go into this bracket kind of with any kind of preconceived notions. You get to see me talk my way into my picks, so it's always a fun time. Mayhem versus the Reign. I think the Reign are the better team. I don't even think it's that much of a question. Probably a 3-1. I think the Mayhem just don't have the firepower to deal with Kai and Venom when they're playing at their best. Exi and Hydron have looked good, of course, this tournament cycle. I don't think Checkmate is really even close to being on the level of Venom when it comes to like Tracer play and stuff like that. So for me, it really is kind of an interesting one to watch to see what happens, because I think there are some similarities, of course. I think it could be an interesting one, but I think that the Mayhem make too many mistakes for me to feel confident they can take this series against a Reign team that, generally speaking, I feel pretty good about. Mayhem are just a little too reckless, a little too risky for my liking. Let's stick with these elimination games as we move on to Thursday. And then we'll move up here for the winners' games as the following matches. Spark versus Outlaws, the battle of the H teams. Can I move this over? Is this a thing I can do? I can. Here we go. Let's do this. All right. Battle of the H teams. Hangzhou versus Houston. I think this one actually might be somewhat one-sided. This is a tough one in some capacities because these are two teams you never know what you're going to get out of them. Houston, I think, a little more consistent with what they are. Obviously, they don't have a ton of flexibility. They haven't looked when Piggy's in, but maybe Piggy gets some more playtime. Maybe he looks better. Who knows, really? I think, generally speaking, we're going to see a lot more Dante still in this tournament cycle than we will Piggy. The Spark do a lot of things. I think they've been trying to experiment and play around with things a little bit to kind of get themselves more flexible, more comfortable with the way that the tournament will probably go, or there's going to be some different types of compositions. They're going to be playing some Western region teams for the first time all season, so I think they want to kind of give themselves a little more flexibility. I think part of the reason why they made the changes they made against the Valiant, if you want my honest opinion, was to kind of hide a little bit of stuff that they're trying to do. They don't want to give too much away, so who knows what we're going to see. At this point, it won't really matter. Come a Thursday, 4 days into the tournament, it won't really matter what's going on, but just something of note, potentially, something that maybe could be a thing that goes down and is definitely, potential to be something, maybe. That's the way my brain works. I think the Spark should be favored to win the series, though. I think they're the better team right now. I think that they just have really good, Shy on Sojourn versus Merit on Sojourn will be really interesting. I'm going to say a 3-2. I don't necessarily know if it'll be this close, but I feel confident that Houston can challenge the Spark a bit. So I'll make it a 3-2, but I think the Spark should win this one, and I think it should be a pretty good win for the Spark in that as well. Fusion versus the Reign. This, I think, could be an incredible series. It is very hard to predict this one. Like I said before with the Fuel match, right? The Fusion, the thing that they're going to rely on heavily is MN3. MN3 is a really big part of their success. If MN3 can beat Kai, this is a huge, huge, huge boon for the Fusion, right? That's kind of what it's going to come down to. I think, the Reign have a lot more of that tank kind of veteran leadership when it comes to Hawk as opposed to Bellisria, though if it's Fury, then you have some of that veteran presence. I'm really high on both of those support lines for both of these teams, so this to me is one that should go the distance. I think these are two really good teams. I'm going to just put it at 2-2 for right now for both teams and just kind of try to convince myself of who I think will win the series. I think it's an interesting one, really, because I think it will come down in a lot of ways to map picks and what the teams are more comfortable on. I think the Fusion, the way they're playing right now, gives them a little bit more flexibility than the Reign do. The Reign feel more comfortable and are really just going all in on Hawk. The Fusion are willing to make some of those moves. They don't do it a lot. Every so often they'll put Fury in for certain maps, but they seem to want to play a lot more Bellisria, which I think is going to result in somewhat clashing styles because I think the Fusion are going to rely more on the main tank role, and the Rain obviously more in the off-tank role. So Doomfist and Sigma probably get a lot of playtime on the Rain. The Fusion have been playing a lot of Wrecking Ball. So I think it'll be an interesting one. I think based on what we've seen in terms of peaks, it's difficult because these are two teams that did pretty well in their respective tournaments. The Fusion, obviously, in the Kickoff Clash got second, and the Rain got third in the Western region. But there's more teams in the West, so like a third-place finish is pretty impressive, compared to a second-place finish in a 4-team tournament. In APAC, it's a little bit different, right? You're getting, top half versus top 3 out of 8, so a little better than top half. So this is an interesting one. It's a tough one. I think I'm going to pick the Fusion for this one. To me, if the Fusion can beat the Fuel, there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to also beat the Rain. I think the Rain are better hit scan-wise than the Fuel are. Guerrilla, when he plays really well, does look very good, but I honestly, after the Fusion beat the Dynasty, I got a pretty good feeling about the Fusion, man. They seemingly have their stuff together and could do some pretty big things in this tournament. Moving up to the winners round. Whew! These are the games I have been wanting to see. We get Shock Dragons, a rematch. This is a time where both of these teams, much like in 2020, feel like they are really good. Last year, the Shock didn't feel like they were on the level of the Dragons. This year, though, there genuinely is a very obvious question of who would win this matchup. This is going to be a fun one for me. I think this series is going to be really, really good. I may surprise some people, though, with how I think this one's going to go. Unsurprisingly, I've talked about this a bit. These are the 4 teams I think are the best teams going into this tournament. Shock, Dragons, Gladiators, Dynasty. So if they are the top 4, I wouldn't be surprised because I think they are the top 4 in the tournament. So with that in mind, I really do think that the San Francisco Shock are my biggest team that are kind of at the top of the standings that I don't feel as confident in, because as much as I think their talent is good, I still think they have some limitations. I think there are still some things I don't feel great about. And their tournament performance kickoff clash was not impressive when they had a very impressive overall kickoff clash. But their tournament performance was not very good. Now, they have some time in between matches here this time around, which I think gives them a little bit more of a benefit, where they have a little bit more leeway and kind of ability to have a high impact. Right, they don't play Monday, they don't play Wednesday, right? They play Thursday, and then they would play continuing on beyond that, assuming they win, of course, in the first round. I think the Shanghai Dragons look really, really good right now. I think they figured out a lot of their issues. I think they know who they are, what they are, and I think pound for pound, roll for roll, the Dragons are probably better on most heroes. Proper is the outlier, maybe is better than some of the eyes on the Dragons, but when you consider Fleta and how good he is, it's really hard to say Proper is better. We haven't seen them, right? And I think even when Proper has his really good performances, I don't think he has that level to carry this team in the way that some other players have. So I honestly think the Dragons should take this one. I'm going to say a 3-2 because I think these are 2 really good teams right now. But I think the Dragons look so good right now, and I think that they should be favored to win this series. If they keep playing the way they're playing right now. Gladiators versus the Dynasty. Oh boy, this is a tough one to pick. Obviously, both these teams won the kickoff clash in their respective regions. LA Gladiators taking it in the West. Dynasty taking it in the East. This is a tough one to call. I think right now, you have to kind of look at is where are these teams at right now, the way they've been playing. Right? Gladiators at a 6-0 stage. Didn't play the best opponents. They played some, okay and not terrible, teams. Obviously, they played the Eastern Outlaws, which is a pretty good series. But the Gladiators are a little bit difficult to read because their region's not as good. The Dynasty are in a very good region, and they lost to a Fusion team that's very, very good. But they also beat the Dragons and the Spark in somewhat dominant fashion, especially the Dragon series. Now, the Dragons are a bit of a different team now, so, they're not different in terms of personnel, but they look better than they were before. These might be the best 2 teams in the entire world right now. It's really, 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 really hard to pick this one. I think it's going to go the distance no matter what, so we're going to go 2-2 for both of these teams. I'm trying to think, who do I think takes this one, right? I'm trying to really go matchup for matchup, pound for pound. I think probably DPS-wise, the Dynasty are probably better. I think that Prophet and Kevster are both really, really good, obviously, and are pretty close. But I think it really comes down to kind of that, I would take Stalker over Potifon, and I would probably take Fitz over Once right now. I don't think Once has been as good as he was back in 2020. Fitz has been pretty consistently good. Tank-wise, Smurf is probably also on the better end right now. So this is a close one for me. It's very, very difficult, but I think Soul take this one 3-2 to go to the finals in the winners bracket against the Dragons. Let's move down here first and take a look at these series. These are some good matches. These are some good games right here. Shock versus the Hangzhou Spark, Gladiators with Philadelphia Fusion. I think these are a little bit more one-sided than some of the other games we have on here. I think the Shock are better than the Spark and not too close in that regard. I think the Shock, generally speaking, are the better team, and like I said, pretty consistently the better team than the Spark. I think of the teams that have left right now, the Spark and are the hardest one to read. I think they're close to the Fusion. Obviously, I picked them to beat the Fusion, so I mean, all 4 APAC teams are still alive in my bracket right now, so that's impressive. But I think the Shock probably win this series 3-1, 3-2. I'm going to say 3-1. I think the Spark could beat them. It's definitely not like something I would say is impossible. The Spark are a good team, and they've looked pretty solid so far this season, at times, especially throughout the season. But right now, I think I would say that the Shock should take this one, are the better team. Gladiators or Fusion, really interesting one. Could see this one going either way, honestly. Depends on what team you're getting. I think the Gladiators are more consistently dominant and more consistently an elite team. Fusion, I think, definitely could have a very good tournament run because they are a solid team with some very solid players. But I think the Gladiators are probably the team that stops their run. Close series, though, probably a 3-2. I think that this could be a really solid game. But I would go for this one in particular with the Gladiators. I think they look a little bit better. We then move up to the winners, finals, Dragons versus Dynasty. Banger of a series, obviously 2-2 this season between these two teams. Dynasty do have the map edge because of their 3-0 result over the Dragons. This one, to me, is two teams playing at their best right now. I think we would go the distance once again. 3-2 win for whoever wins this one, 5-map series. Really, 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 really close, I think. This is an interesting one. I think this will be a great series. I think this will be a fantastic game. I've loved this series pretty much every time they've met. The 3-0 was a bit of an exception, but when they met in the kickoff clash, all 3 meetings, absolutely incredible. I definitely could see this series going either way. Something deep down inside me wants to pick the Dragons, and I don't know why. Something feels like the mid-season madness is when the Dragons once again return to form. It just feels like we're going in that direction. It's a hard thing to pick against the Dynasty because the Dynasty have looked incredible this season. I think they've looked really, really good. And so it's difficult for me to pick this one because it's like my brain is telling me the Dynasty, my heart is telling me the Dragons. It's a weird, weird dynamic I'm dealing with right now. It's a tough one to call. I think it's pretty close overall. I don't necessarily know if it's going to be as close as I think it will be. But I think this is a tough one to call. I'm stalling because I really don't know who I want to pick this one. I think I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to the Dynasty. I think they've been more consistently good this season, obviously. 2-2 against the Dragons. Very, very close overall for them. So I think Dynasty take this one, but I really don't think it's a guarantee. This one could go either way. I think the Dragons look really good right now. It's really hard to pick against them, but I think the Dynasty get the edge just ever so slightly in this one. We have the Shock versus Gladiators as the next series, setting up our losers bracket semifinals. This may not surprise many of you. I think the Shock look good right now. I don't think they look to be a dominant team in the same way that some of these other teams have been. Gladiators, I think, are going to be angry if they play the Shock again, because obviously the last time they played the Shock was a reverse sweep. They don't want that to happen again. If I'm the Gladiators and I have to meet the Shock again, I am going in. I want to win this series. I think the Gladiators have way more tournament experience this season. A lot more just kind of like We've done the traveling. We've won on LAN, all this type of stuff. This would kind of be a LAN because they're in the same like place, even if they're not playing on stage. It's kind of a LAN. So Gladiators were LANimals when they played before. So I'm gonna go Gladiators. This one 3-2. I think Shock are pretty good. I don't want to write them off super easily, but that's kind of where we're at. And no matter what, if we get this losers finals or lower bracket finals, whatever you want to call it, we're doing pretty well at this point. This is a pretty good finals, no matter what. If it's if it's Gladiators Dynasty or if it's Dragons Dynasty, it'll be great. I think Gladiators Dragons you have to expect to go to 5. These are two really good teams, really, really solid teams, really solid competitors. I really want the grand finals to be between East and West. I think it just makes for a better show because it really is like who will come out on top between East and West. So I really want that to be the case. Doesn't necessarily mean I think that's what is going to happen, but I think it would be a much more interesting product if the grand finals is East versus West. This one's tough for me because I think the Dragons, you still have them as a championship caliber roster. These are my top 2 teams in my preseason power rankings. Like, these are 2 really good teams. These are 2 really solid teams. It's really hard to pick either one of these teams. But I think I'm going to go with the Dragons because as much as I love the Gladiators, and I think the Gladiators are a very good team, and I think they're the best team in the West right now, the Dragons are calling to me. Something about the Dragons feels like they are going to be competing till the end. And I think that the Dragons are going to do everything they can to be the winners of this tournament. I don't know why I feel this way. I couldn't tell you what it is that's making me feel so strongly about this, but just something tells me that the Dragons are going to take that series. For the grand finals, I hope it is a 7-map Gigabanger Classic that goes all the way and goes the distance between the Dynasty and the Dragons. Something, though, about a second meeting between these two teams makes my heart and my brain almost line up for the grand finals. I don't know what it is. I don't know why my brain thinks this way, but to me, if you are the Dragons and you have just fought a 5-map series against the Gladiators, what's 7 more? You've already played 5 long maps. Like you've already done this today. What's 7 more? You already knew you were in for the long haul. You already knew you were in for the long run. Something screams to me that this is going to be the Dragons reclaiming their position as the top team in the Overwatch League. I don't know why I have this feeling. Something in my bones tells me that we are going to be talking about the Dragons being the best team once again at the end of this tournament, and the Dragons are going to have figured everything out. They're going to put everything together behind the genius of head coach Moon and on the back of incredible plays from Lip. Something tells me that this will be a Dragons tournament win. Very interesting bracket there. Kind of go back real quick and kind of do a little bit of a run through so you can kind of see where it is. So there's round 1 over here, boo, 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 and round 2, boo, 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 and then you move down here to elimination games, and then more elimination games over here, and up here we got some winners games, and then we got some games down here, and over here, and also here, and then this one and that one. So this is a long video, obviously long bracket, so kind of what you kind of expect, but it is what it is. You guys stuck through it. Thank you all so much. Hope you guys enjoyed. Obviously, for me, making a bracket is fun. I like doing these a lot, so thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed, consider liking and subscribing for more videos like this in the future. Comment down below who you think is going to win the Midseason Madness. That's going to be all, though, for me for today. Hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.